Sorry, there was no pizza.
We understand. Oh, you were downstairs? Oh no. Where did you end up parking? Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah.
Near my old apartment.
Nice. The
Oh, I'll just park here. It's familiar to me. I'll walk. I was a little nervous because I was like the last parking spot. I was like almost that's why.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And the signage can be weird too. It's like, yeah.
This is the last disco
Really?
of the semester.
Wow.
The last one.
Ending on a high note. So do you know what day it is today?
25th? What about the 25th? Yeah. What is this movie?
Miss Congeniality. That's Miss Rhode Island.
Oh. You know, they're imperfect today.
You know what? Christiana and I also
Oh,
realized today is our anniversary, and we just like a couple weeks ago
you're
figured it.
sharing to Zoom right now.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That would make sense.
Oh my goodness. Gracious.
Okay, yeah, so you can just still see.
Oh geez. I see a bunch of gray boxes.
Share. God. Still just that.
I think it's the Zoom controls.
Are those that's so weird that it shows that. Huh.
Yeah.
Weird. I'll try to like
Those you can hide too.
I know I can hide them on.
Then it's Control, Alt, Shift, H.
Yeah, weird. I've never seen that happen.
Yeah.
Maybe there's layouts and options. If I share my host screen, do you still see the little blocks for those?
Yeah.
That's so weird. Huh.
I don't know why. This has never happened to me.
You know?
Well, I think just be wary that there are blocks.
Yeah, I'll try to like hide as much of this stuff and just keep it.
I'll read off any chat questions and stuff. So
That sounds good. Will hide me.
I think if you bring back those controls, sorry.
Yeah.
I think if you use the 3 dots,
Yes.
you can click hide video.
Hide video panel. Hide
Hide
reading
meeting.
controls. All right.
Okay.
And I'll still be able to
Be chat. So I'll be on chat.
you'll be chat. Okay, I'll just need to keep hiding those if I get out of this. So maybe I'll just wait for people to percolate in before start going about things.
I don't know how to Zoom people today. It's like 15 Zoom people.
Nice.
Because you stopped serving pizza, right?
I know.
There's no incentive.
I
you know.
know we stopped with the pizza. I'm so sad about it. I didn't come.
You what?
think a couple more. PCB folks are coming.
Yeah, I think Paul Stay and Jocelyn were.
Oh, yes, I was about to pass it in. Yeah.
How's it going, Sam?
Good. How are you?
You know, good as can be. We're chilling, you know.
Yeah, I realized I could pause it. Did I pause the recording? I can pause the recording.
You can always edit it after.
That's true.
Good. Yeah. Yeah, we'll give it a couple for people on Zoom. We'll give it a couple more. I'll give it to 12:05 to start. Nice. 23 people. So yeah, thanks for everyone for joining. We'll be starting in a bit. Today is April 25th, and if you are in or around Rhode Island, this is a perfect date. This is a screenshot from Miss Congeniality, Farley Brothers movie, famed Rhode Island directors. This is Miss Rhode Island.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want to turn your video on for the Zoom folks?
Oh yeah, I'm happy to do that. Can you see me?
Yes.
You have a mic on?
I do. Can you hear okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I'll project also.
This is also our last DSCoV of the semester.
Yeah,
And
last DSCoV.
We'll probably be back in the fall. So
Nice.
however that shakes up.
Cool. Well, maybe I'll get started here. So hello everyone. I can't see all the folks on Zoom, but welcome to the final DSCoV of the season. Today we're going to be talking about Datawrapper, which is a data visualization platform. If you are following along, we'll have instructions for signing up and for downloading the files for today. You can also just have fun, sit back and enjoy the ride. So my name is Max Krieger. I am a project director at the People, Place, and Health Collective, which is a group within the Brown University School of Public Health. We do a lot of plain language communication work. We do a lot of work with the state health agencies, and Datawrapper has been a really cool tool that we've utilized more and more to create maps and cool graphs and things like that. So today, in 55 minutes, we'll cover creating a bar chart, and we'll be creating a map as well. So a lot to do today. So here's some examples that I pulled from things within our work and kind of other uses of Datawrapper. So in the top left corner is actually a graph that we made for the Department of Health here in Rhode Island during COVID. I actually just saw this article today from the Brown Herald, might have been today or yesterday, but they were using Datawrapper in their news article, which was really cool. And then you can see these other examples that have been used by other types of news agencies. So you can kind of get the picture here. These are meant to create, pretty impactful visualizations that are highly customizable, and people are using them in all different kinds of ways. So what we'll need to, if you want to follow along today and create a map and a bar chart with us, you'll need to create a Datawrapper account, and it's free to sign up. So let me get that link here. It's datawrapper.de. So let me share this in the chat. Where are we here? You got it. I also have it. So yeah, if this is your first time using Datawrapper, there should be a button, or you should be prompted to sign up. And I'm pretty sure you can use Brown's single sign-in option to get started, or you could use a personal email address. And GitHub, actually, you could use your GitHub account if you're so inclined. So I'll give people a little bit of time there to sign up. And this is kind of the main interface. We're going to be working today in this dashboard area, which is going to basically bring us to any charts that you've been working on recently. And you're also going to be able to create new charts here. So this is really your archive of different projects. So maybe if folks on Zoom could just give me like a okay or something, if people here are following along, maybe like a thumbs up or something. Cool. Alrighty. So yeah, Datawrapper, if you want to learn more after today's session, they have a ton of resources on here. They have this like Datawrapper Academy. We're just going to be covering a couple of things today, some basic features to get people rolling. But there's a lot more to dive in here. So the first thing that we're going to do here is we're going to create a chart. And for today's session, I have some data that we can use, which I will also share in the chat. Oh, okay, thank you. And this data are available on the DSCoV GitHub. And it's these three files here. We're going to have some CSV data for our map. We're going to have a GeoJSON file for our map, and then we're going to have another CSV file for creating our bar chart. So it's very this is pretty like simple data. So take a moment to download these necessary files. You can also manually input these things into Datawrapper, which we'll dive into in just a second. So, like I mentioned, we'll be creating yes, Ellen.
See on the GitHub.
Okay. Gotcha. Oh yeah, it is. I don't know how to disable that, but essentially you can download the data. Hopefully you're not on dark mode. So yeah, the first thing we want to do here is to create a chart. And to do that in Datawrapper, once you're logged in, you have your account and everything, and you're on this main dashboard, you can create a new chart. So it's just this create new chart. And once we do that, Datawrapper is going to prompt us to upload data. Datawrapper accepts a wide variety of data from text files, CSV files. You can connect to Google Sheets. You can connect to external data. So for example, when we were building these charts for the Department of Health, they had their own Google Sheet. All we needed to do was connect to that, and new data would update, every day. So we're going to upload a CSV file, and this was the data that we just downloaded from GitHub. So the one that I want to use here is this OD race DSCoV. So the OD race DSCoV is what we're going to use to create our chart. And once I do that, it's just going to load, because it's a CSV file, it's just going to load that data in here. And this is how Datawrapper is going to see this data. You could have just typed this data in yourself as well. So that's something you can do if you want to just make a very simple chart, kind of just on the go. And I did want to note something here. So yeah, the data from today, we're going to be looking at overdose data from the Rhode Island Department of Health's Overdose Data Hub. So that was just a CSV file that I downloaded from them. So one thing to note here is that Datawrapper, depending on the type of visualization, they might want the data shown in a particular way. And in this case, this is maybe not a way that I'm used to having data organized in a database, for example. But this is the way that for this particular type of line chart, we would want the data to show in Datawrapper. And any Datawrapper visualization that is hosted on this website that you come across, you can open those up and edit them to see how they formatted their data. So if there's a particular type of chart that you might be interested in, and you're wondering how did they get their data to look like that, you can just go and edit that Datawrapper that they made and see how they laid out their data. So yeah, so they're really looking for this type of chart. They're looking for, it's called a pivot table, where every single category is kind of in its own column. So I'm going to switch back for a second to our Datawrapper tab. So after you've gotten your data in there, the next thing to do is to move to step number 2, which is just to check this data. And Datawrapper is going to look at your data and understand, does it consider something to be a date field? Does it consider something to be, a number field or a text field? So this is where you can make these types of modifications. If for example, we wanted this to show up as like a percentage, you could do that here. If you wanted to round numbers, you could do that here. But to me, all of this looks good. So now I want to move on to step number 3, which is to visualize this data. And once we get to here is where we have all of these different types of charts and all of these different options available to us for us to use. In this case, it auto-detected this line chart, but you could look into bar charts or column charts or these types of things. Again, these are all going to really depend on how the data is set up. So if you're ever curious, I'll show everyone in a bit the repository of different charts that exist and things like that. But know essentially that every single chart requires the data to be in a particular format. And Datawrapper really, they explain what each one needs. So I always recommend, if you are creating any type of visualization or a map or anything like that, always do all of your data work and data prep work ahead of time, because it's just going to make it so much easier just to execute this. Okay, so this is basically where we're at right now, where we have our raw data in there. So let's start to actually refine what we're looking at here. So in this visualization tab, we have these other subtabs here. We can choose our chart type, and then we can move on to refine. So we can actually start to configure and mess around with what this visualization is showing. So in here, we're looking at columns are assigned to years, which is good. You know, we want to look at how these overdose rates are changing over time. So on this horizontal axis, everything kind of looks good here. Things are shown as years. I like that. There's tons of other options if you had other types of dates there. You can mess with some of these grid lines and things like that. I kind of like them off. And the next thing we can do is look at the vertical axis. So what the scale is there. Things are linear, which I think makes sense here. But there's more things you could do to modify, you know, those things. Labels, for example, you know, you could choose to like hide these if you wanted. So for the actual lines that are representing the data here, this is where I want to draw out a bit of more of a story here, because what I want to show is that the rates for Black and African American Rhode Islanders has really spiked in 2018 to 2020, and it hasn't really declined that much. It still is really high. So there's a number of things that we can do to really accentuate that point that we're trying to make. So for each one of these lines here, we can customize these to show different things. So I want to really highlight this one line. So I'm going to change the color to an orange, and I'm going to make it a bit thicker. And for these other ones, for Hispanic or Latino and white, I kind of want those lines to be a bit more muted. So I'm going to turn those to gray. So I just want to use this as an example to show you can kind of quickly just in Datawrapper start to tell a bit of a story here. You know, you can change whether you want these to be dashed or dotted or just straight lines. So to me, that looks pretty good. You can also do things like show the values on here. And you can show like the symbols of these, basically change like the ends of these if you wanted to. So there's a lot of customization that's possible here. One other thing that I'll do, and this is just purely visual, but I'm going to select one of these and hold Shift and select all of them. And I want to interpolate these lines to make them a bit more smooth. I don't know. To me, it's just appealing. So it's probably not like the most accurate thing to the data, but I think it's just something like as a viewer kind of is nice. You can also do this thing to show the outline of these so that it adds a bit of a halo effect around these lines. So if you had a bunch of intersecting lines like white and Hispanic, those lines cross each other, that it adds a bit of halo effect to those. So that to me looks pretty good right now. So what's next? We've customized each line. And like I said, this is something that a lot of, you know, this is one way of really drawing out context or really adding a point of comparison. So this isn't for nothing, you know, this is an article from the New York Times about brain fog and how it relates to COVID. So, you know, they had a bunch of different data points here. They really wanted to draw people's attention to this one trend about concentration. So they paired this piece of data with pictures and with other data. So I kind of want to do the same thing here and start to create a bit of a narrative. So everything to me is looking pretty good right now. There's some other options here that we'll cover when we go to make our maps. You know, you can mess with like margins and all these types of things, but I think everything is looking okay right now. So let's move on to the next step. So the next step is to add your titles, your annotations, and all of these other nice things that you know, you'd expect to see in a chart like this. So because I downloaded this data from this Rido data hub, they actually have, I might have to go back to pull the link from where I got this. They actually have some nice prepared text that we can just borrow from. So I won't burden people with this. I mean, get as far as you want to get with this. Let me, I'll share this in the chat. If I can find my. So this is where I downloaded the data from. But what you're going to see is they'll have a nice title that we can use. There's nice data notes that we can draw from. These are all really good things to include in these types of graphs. So I believe it was this one. So this is also where you could, you know, get a bit more journalistic if you wanted to. You know, in this slide, what do I say? Black and African American Rhode Islanders experience the highest rates of fatal overdose. So you could type that here. You know, so you really want that title to reflect what is being shown there. So I think this is a bit different than maybe, you know, a really big dashboard or something that displays a ton of dynamic information. These data wrappers can really be used to draw out, you know, a main point or to really try to get that message across. So you really want that title to reflect what folks are looking at here in the data. And then here, like, I can go and view more about this data set. You know, they have a ton of like notes here that we can borrow. So I'm just going to copy those and, you know, put those in this notes section here. This is all, you know, good things to include. You know, there's the description, you know, you could say like, you know, the rates of overdose peaked in 2019, but have not, you know, declined as rapidly. You know, this is where we would spend some time really like workshopping this message you're trying to tell, so that, you know, if you were using this just as a sole standalone figure, you'd want to make sure you have all that information in there. If this was part of like an article or, you know, a presentation or something like that, you might not need all of that extra info. So the last thing I want to do here is add some of these annotations. And I think that we like the message is already kind of like, we got the message across, but these types of annotations, especially if you have a lot of data that you're trying to show, can just even more so like draw people's eyes to that piece of data and just add a bit more of that interpretation piece. Because I think so often people are confronted with data or big data visualizations or maps, and they might not really know where to start. So annotations are a great feature of Datawrapper. So these are under this annotation tab, and we can add a text annotation by doing this. So we could say the rates of overdose, spiked in 2019, but have not declined. And each of these annotations can be edited as well. So we can change, let's make these bold. You could make it a bit bigger if you wanted to. Again, we could add that text outline, so it gives it a bit of like a halo effect. You can change the, if we want this centered. And then we can also have it draw a line to where we want it to go. So once you flip that on, you get more options. So we could have this just point at the line. And yeah, there's all different kinds of options here. Let's make this a little bit thicker. And you can have the line be the same text as the color. And just for added effect, I will change the color of this text to match that orange. So just that like adds kind of a little bit of extra, maybe if you didn't have this big title and this was kind of just embedded in a report or in a website or something, you could just have that piece there really draw out that message a bit more. And again, this is really like what someone like the New York Times is doing when they have something like this. They're really trying to make it so this is just kind of really integrated into the story that they're trying to tell. So annotations are great and a really cool feature of Datawrapper. So I know I'm jumping all around here, but to me, this is looking pretty good. So the last thing to do is to publish this. So data wrappers are interactive by default. So I go back to our little data wrapper and we'll hit proceed. So we'll be in this. Oh yeah, there's additional options here for layout and things like that. A lot of options here. You can have people download the data if you want to. You can have an embed link. You could have social media buttons. There's a lot of options here. So there's a lot of ways, like if you have a particular brand and branding, full integration there. So the last thing we're going to do here on step number 4 is to publish and embed this visualization. So right now, this data wrapper is not published. So I can't really share this with people, but I could download a PNG if I wanted to. PDFs, SVGs, and zip files are for, there is like a paid version of this, but we've been using this for a long time and haven't paid anything. So when you publish this, what this is doing is putting it on Datawrapper's server, making it available so that you can then embed this. Yes, Ellen. Questions? Oh boy.
Is there a way to center the title? And then is there an
Oh, yeah.
undo button somewhere?
Yes. So centering. Yes, you can. If you go back to refine. Oh, maybe there's not actually. I may be wrong. Yeah, please.
I just checked, they have an API.
There's an API. Yes. That's a good question. I have no idea how much can be done through the API. I assume a lot because I see data wrappers used in enterprise environments, and I assume that those are plugged into, large data warehouses and things like that. But that's not something I've explored. We've really just used this for like figures in a manuscript, on a website, to create social media stuff for sharing, things with community partners. So there's likely a way to really integrate this. Some of those examples that I included were from, like the Philadelphia Inquirer. These are like, I assume, pretty big operations where lots of people are generating these for different purposes. So I think that's something, yeah, to look into. So there's no way to center the title. So I was wrong about that. But if you're embedding this in a place where you have more control over, CSS or HTML, like you could just add the titles kind of outside of that. You could purely just use Datawrapper for the visual embedding. And then the other question, was there an undo button somewhere? I'm just doing Control Z and that's working. So I think, yeah, I think you're like, that should work. I'm sure there is maybe like a button somewhere, but yeah, Control or Command Z seems to work. I'm not sure if that is like persistent page to page. And I know less about versioning as well. Oh, actually, hold on. Here we go. Edit history. Let's see. All right, here we go. There are ways. I guess it does take snapshots. So that's something you could look into as well. Any other text or any other comments? No. Okay. So yeah, so this is the last thing is that once your Datawrapper is published, you can share this link with folks. You can use this responsive iframe and really customize it more. It does all of the like mobile conversion and all that stuff for you, and I think it does it pretty well. I've tested it out a bunch. Like it takes these annotations and turns those into like more of like a press to pull up the annotation. So it does a lot of that stuff on its own. But if you have like specific, dimensions, for example, like publishing a manuscript, they have very specific, like, this is the size. You can set all of those things and just download a PNG. But when you create this embed link or the shareable link, it allows people to access these like nice interactive features. So yeah, that's it for this chart. Maybe I'll pause there and see if there's any questions. I also wanted to just flag for people. I was going to do this at the end, but I feel like I should do it now. Datawrapper has this whole academy where they give insight into any type of chart that you want to make. There's like these custom and enterprise features. Maybe that's where there's more info about these APIs. And then the other thing that I wanted to show people is what's called the river. And this is essentially like a repository of charts that people all over the world are publishing. So you can go here, you can look at some of like their favorites, like the team has selected some of their favorites, and start to see the types of Datawrapper charts that are available and how people are using these. And anyone that looks interesting, you can open up and they have this option to reuse this chart. So this is something I think is really, really interesting. And you can get a bit more insight into when you go to this check and describe, you can see essentially how they have their data set up so that if you wanted to make the same exact chart, this is what I had mentioned at the beginning, just open that up and see how it's done, and then spend that time, in whatever program of your choosing, editing your data to fit into that format. So pretty cool. I think it's a great way to like jumpstart and just kind of get more ideas and stuff. Some of the map things here are cool. They've given me a lot of like insight or inspiration rather. And then you can kind of like get the sense like you'll be like going through like, I don't know, a news article. I think more and more I'm like, oh man, is that like, are they using Datawrapper here? So, okay, a little bit of an aside there. So the next thing that I want, yes, please.
Lock down the raw data so it can't be published by others when published.
Can we lock down raw data? Let me go to this. Can you lock down raw data so it can't be downloaded by others when published? I assume so. And this might also be like one of the limitations here, why folks might want to use like an enterprise kind of deployment. But that's something I can check now. And Genu is on a basic Otter. Okay, that's Otter. Thanks, Max. I was just about to ask if you could drop the resource links here in the chart as well. Yes. So those are also here on this little burger menu. And I assume we can share these slides after, and there's links into like the data and all of the charts that we use in the data that I pulled from there. Is there any other questions? No. So let me just check. Yes, please. One more question. So the question was, there's many data visualization tools, and is there something special about this tool? Like, why would we want to use this tool? Oh, and there is an option here for having the data be downloadable or not. That's a great question. For me, as someone who has worked with a lot of different types of data visualization tools, something that I really appreciate about Datawrapper is just how quickly it is to create something very impactful and simple. I work a lot in Tableau and in ArcGIS. These are really powerful tools. Sometimes you just want to take the rowboat out. You don't want to just be confined to the yacht every time you're just trying to, go down the river. So I find tools like this are, for me, quicker to just jump into, make something really impactful, and kind of share widely. The other thing is that on my team, we have a number of staff who are really interested in data visualization. And we want to start involving more people into feeling empowered and being able to make data visualizations of their own. And I find a tool like this is a much easier step into than something like Tableau, where it's like you might sink 20 to 40 hours into and just start scratching the surface. So I think the kind of just that like reusability that I was just showing, like, can really just jumpstart people's learning and just give people a lot of ideas and kind of just get going. Yeah, another question.
What is so with most of these web visualizations that let's say that we use it to embed in some other websites.
Yeah.
What is the applicability of, on the other hand, what are the potential points of things being disappeared, like for example, link rot or data not showing or whatever, like accounts not?
Yes. Yeah, so the question was, what are the concerns over like links disappearing and link rot, which I've never heard of. That's cool.
That's not so bad.
Yes.
Does web like the web archive also archive these things, or is it gonna show like blank
Yeah, so the question was, yeah, also in addition to just like links disappearing or these being archived, does the web archive, are those able to archive these types of visualizations? From my experience, I mean, I'm talking back to 2020, I still have access to those charts and can reuse those. Because these are dynamic, like I feel like a web scraping, archiving thing like that is likely to lose these. But if you were really concerned, you could also just download the PNGs of these. Again, yeah, this might be a, a limitation of a tool like this. It's not going to give you that code that you can just have on hand. But in using this tool for, half a decade now, I can still go back to all the different charts that I've made from, a long time ago. But this also could be something I haven't fully looked into this. Datawrapper might have more info. So I think there's some questions here that like I'll definitely be looking into after, which they might have on their like FAQ or data wrapper academy. So for sake of time, I'm going to move us along because I want us to create a map. And we're going to create a map in 15 minutes here, which I don't think you could say for every program. So we're going to do this by going to this create new section. And rather than create a chart, we're going to make a map. There's a bunch of different types of maps you can use here. We're going to make a very common map called the choropleth map. And the data that I provided in that GitHub repository contains a GeoJSON file and a CSV file. Now, you don't have to use these custom, these are like custom shape files and custom map boundaries that we're going to make. But, I could just look up here, Rhode Island, and it's going to show me all of the different types of maps that are available for Rhode Island. So long as you have information at a census tract level, you can use Datawrapper to make these types of maps just kind of out of the box. Just basically paste your data in there. And there's quite a bit of different shape files that are available. But we're going to draw our own. We're going to upload our own custom map. And it's this map geometry.geojson. And this is basically going to give Datawrapper all of the information that it needs to know, because I want to make a map of Providence. So this here is our map of Providence. So we have all of our boundaries here. Now we just need to put some data into them. So if I hit proceed, it's going to ask us now to add our data. So how I want to do this is right here in this upload a file. And when I do that, now I want to add this map data, which should be conveniently called map data. And while that kind of does its thing, I want to give folks just a little insight into what we're doing here. We're taking the CSV information and putting it within these boundaries. So if you're new to mapping, this is a very common type of operation, which is called a join. So essentially, you have two different data sets that have a common element, and you're going to use that common element to join these things together. So in this case, there's like a object ID field, which is this object ID. That's the common element between our CSV file and our GeoJSON file. So when we do that and we merge those things together, it's going to allow us to use one of the fields in the CSV data set to show up on this GeoJSON map. So let me switch back over to our data wrapper here. So now these two pieces of data sets together is going to give us all of these different fields. So we have our object ID field, which is basically just that unique ID field. And then this middle field, this represents the percentage of children that had in Providence a lead blood test that exceeded a safe level. And then the other thing here is basically where does that neighborhood fall in these health equity zones? So I actually want to use this lead field as our values field. So this is basically what I want to be visualizing. When I do that, you can kind of see, now we have our little values thing here. That's just telling Datawrapper like, hey, like this is what I want to show up on the map. And you should get something that looks like this, where you have all of your different neighborhoods in Providence, and then you have these values from this column B showing up there. And then I'm going to hit proceed. Again, this is that match thing, that match tab. Everything looks good to me. I'm going to hit proceed again. And then it says everything looks good. Maybe I'll look into the chat really quick. Okay, just you, Ellen. All good. Okay, so now I'm going to hit proceed. And this is where we can start to have a little bit of fun. So this column, this first thing, now we're really like, this is what makes maps maps. They're being able to play around with colors and what we're looking at here. We're choosing to show these lead test results, but there's also this information about these health equity zones. So I could show, for example, I could have two maps here. I could have one show, here's all these different health equity zones, and here are the neighborhoods that fall into those, and then here are those results from these different tests. And just like we had some options in the charts, we have more options here as well. There's different ways of basically showing colors on maps, and this is something I'm not going to go into too much detail about, but there's tons of different options for how to have map data appear when you're using colors. And those are all going to mean different things, but I'll just use these natural breaks, which are basically what determines how the colors show up on the map. And a legend is here by default, which is great. There's a bunch of options for our legends. Right now, these are showing up as integers, but I want these to show up as percentages, because what this data is showing is the percentage of tests that exceeded this limit. So I think we're right now, we're at the Carney Institute, which is somewhere over here on the east side. So this neighborhood, ID number 461, children in this neighborhood had, 16% of children in this neighborhood had a test that exceeded this limits. I'm not a lead expert, so I could be getting this slightly wrong. But let's just pretend this is really what it's about. So I really want to draw, let's say I'm from, Lower South Providence here, and I really want to draw more attention to, I'm from this health equity zone, and I really want people to focus on this information. I'm going to use what's called a pattern overlay here. And what I'm going to do with this is to kind of use these health equity zones to start to add some color blocking, so that, well, you'll see as we go along. So under this pattern overlay, I'm going to use this health equity zone column, and I'm going to start adding patterns for every single health equity zone other than the 02907 one. So the Central Providence one, the this area, I guess in the east side of Providence, we don't have a health equity zone over here, and the South Providence health equity zone. So you can use these to do some cool overlays here. So I'm gonna click one of these and then press Shift to select all of them. Now I want all of these to kind of fade that information into the background a bit. So you can mess with these settings. We can mess with the width of these lines, the opacity, to really start to like draw out this one area down here. Yep, you can change the colors. That looks a little intense, actually. We'll leave it at this for now. That looks good to me. Okay, I'm gonna keep going down here. Legend, we want to keep this legend. I'm gonna hide this pattern legend. I don't really think we're gonna need that. You can add more padding to the map. Some cool things you can do there. Anything else we want to add here? No, that looks good for now. Now I'm going to show us how we can just do a couple more things to make this really pop. Now let's go to the annotation tab. And let's say, children in the 02907 health equity zone are at high risk for lead poisoning. This is where you would spend a lot of time, creating a good title, a good description, all that stuff. But I also want to add a text annotation here to really draw out this one neighborhood. You could say something like, children in this neighborhood. Sorry, a bit of a delay here. Children in this neighborhood had, very high levels of lead in their blood. I want to do the same thing. I want to make this bold. I'll center this and I'll draw a line. And I really want to have that line point to this one particular neighborhood here. Make it a bit thicker. Really want to draw folks' attention here. And yeah, that looks good. You could play with, let's make it a little curved. Okay. So that to me looks pretty good right now. If I'm in this neighborhood, I really want to draw the attention there. Maybe there's more statistics I know about this neighborhood in particular. We just went from having all of this information about all of these different neighborhoods and really kind of brought people into thinking about this one particular area. So you could use maps like this in combination with other maps. You could go through, you could think about the same thing about using color blocking to block this neighborhood, but show another neighborhood and really kind of walk the viewer through, each one of these neighborhoods. But yeah, like I said, we had a map up in very short amount of time. The last thing I'll cover with maps, just in this particular case, are these tooltips. So anytime you mouse over a neighborhood, it's going to give you a bit more information about that polygon that we have selected. So tooltips borrow information from the data set. So we could have, for example, rather than region name here, I could have this be the health equity zone. So anytime someone moves to a different health equity zone, it shows different information there. You could really create a compelling story if you spent some more time with this. You could add more information in there. So there's a lot you can really do. So let me move us through some of these show you if we had a little bit more time. This is probably a more descriptive title and description there. You know, we added a bit more text on, you know, the legend to let people know exactly what they're looking at. And then here's an example of, you know, if we spent some more time with that tooltip. So a lot you can do here. So that's essentially it for the day. You know, like I said, this data river is really cool. There's tons of different ways of like using these maps, and really, you know, different types of charts. So definitely take some time to go there. The Datawrapper Academy, it also probably has some answers to a lot of these questions. So yeah, we could take a couple minutes for questions, but thank you everyone so much here today and on Zoom as well. Yeah, thanks everyone for joining on Zoom.
Thank you. That's great demonstration. Thank you so much. Thank you for this. I'll look forward to joining in the future. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kimberly.
I guess I shouldn't.